Hey everyone, welcome to another podcast episode here at High Level called the High Level Spotlight Sessions. I've got an incredible SaaSPRENEUR and digital citizen in our ecosystem and our family, Will Hurst. He's a power player. He came to a ton of our events, collaborated with us in many ways, and I asked Will, "Hey, can we jump on a podcast?" And it's time. It's time that we share the story of what you've been through to get to well over 500 plus clients using High Level. Will, thanks for jumping in, man. I'm excited to do this podcast with you. I feel honored.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. I'm honored to be here, man. It's great to be recognized, as in the digital space, there's not a lot of like in athletics, there's a lot of trophies. There's not a lot of trophies or ways to get recognition here. And for you guys to have me here kind of feels like one of those kinds of things where it's like, cool, I'm getting a little airtime for all the hard work. So I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
Well, what's your story? How did you get started in business? How did you get started in entrepreneurship? And after that, I'll kind of go through the plan discussion to make, this podcast as fruitful as possible to kind of share the journey of 500 plus clients. But first, who's Will Hurst? Help me understand your journey in from a bigger entrepreneurial business standpoint.
Yeah, no, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that. It's always important, I think, to share the backstory and how we got here. So for me, like it started back in the recession, like the '08 recession, actually, back about 15 years ago. My last job, I guess you can call it, before I decided to go into entrepreneurship and before that started to appeal to me. I guess it always appealed to me, but I was selling cars. I was in the car business. Worked for one of the top 10 Buick, Pontiac, GMC dealerships. Short story there is poor kid, moved from Detroit out west and no college degree, nothing, but I knew how to sell and I knew about cars. Like I grew up in Detroit working on cars. So like combine those two things. It's like I walked into a dealership one day and they're like, hey, you should go on the sales floor. And within a couple of years, I was one of the top three sales reps in the western half of the United States for General Motors. So like rose to the ranks pretty quickly. And there was no like real salesy stuff going on there. It was just being a good person, building a good book of business, kind of learning a lot of the things then that became really valuable to me later in entrepreneurship around prospecting, because that's the only way you were going to be a standout in that space. You couldn't just rely on the dealership to feed you leads. You had to go out and create your own book of business and your own funnels, if you will. That were bringing in traffic. So I did that, and then the recession hit. Naturally, anything like cars, houses, any of those big purchases went on hold for people. And I remember there was a day where I sold a car to a gentleman who was an entrepreneur, and it was really inspiring. He was telling me about his business, and I had it in my head for like a couple of years. I'm like, man, like, and it was this guy who had like, the white picket fence, everything that like I didn't have growing up. And I was like, and a similar story was similar to mine at the time, where I was like, man, it'd be great to do that one day, or to have a life like that one day. And I was like, and it was like kind of like I met the guy and he had like an 800 credit score and making good money and was buying a nice truck. And I was like, you mean to tell me I can break out through entrepreneurship and going out on my own? I'm like, that sounds pretty inspiring. So a couple of years later, when the recession hit, I took that opportunity to make the leap, and I started a landscaping company, like a landscaping installation business. We installed artificial grass lawns. And this is all important to the story because it goes back this far as to how I even ended up here with High Level. Because we built that business, and because I got good at prospecting and sales and understanding follow-up. Follow-up was really big with that first company, because that first company, this company, we ended up building like 5 million a year. And it was really like two things: being a young millennial at the time and Google ads and digital marketing coming on the scene. I had to be one of like the first people running like Google ads for like a local brick and mortar business. It was like '07, '08. I'm sure there are people in it before then, but it was usually more like corporate enterprise at that level. It wasn't little small businesses, but it gave me a huge separator, because a lot of the competition were guys that are a whole generation ahead of me that hadn't been in business installing landscaping in the area for 10, 20 years. I was able to basically just bite huge chunks out of the market share because they weren't ready to make that move. And I did. So I learned Google ads when they were like 5 cents a lead, and built a multiple $1 million a year on business on that. And what had happened in that whole process was 2011-ish. So when I was in car sales, the one thing they teach you to be really good at is using a CRM. You know what I mean? What we call a CRM, right? I know I don't like to refer to high level CRM. I know you guys don't like to necessarily call it just a CRM, because it's more than that. But back then it was like a CRM, a place to organize all your leads and follow up and take notes and have tasks. And when I started my own company for a couple of years of like getting all these leads, I was like, man, I really need a CRM for this. But there weren't really like brick and mortar level solutions. It was all enterprise level. So I actually like found a guy like on the internet. I think through like the early days of like Upwork, I think it might have been called Odesk back then. I found a guy for like a couple $100, like made me a little like CRM on the back of my website, like hard coded it and everything. I don't know. The guy's probably making millions now because he's a developer, but back then it was almost like they weren't pulling that kind of weight. And it was like he was an odd job and he took it. He built me a little CRM with some basic automation and just to notify me that I got like leads and stuff like that. And ever since, like all my businesses afterwards, all my brick and mortar, I owned a couple gyms. I started an e-com business, a bunch of other things, all involved some sort of like technology. And then, mid 2010s, my gyms, I had my 2 gyms, and we had marketing funnels for that. Facebook ads were hot, so we were running a lot of leads and traffic and ads to get leads off of those platforms. And we started to assemble a system. Like I was using like ClickFunnels and like 18 other pieces of software with a mega zap. I call it like the mega zap. And it was like, anybody who was in it back then, it wasn't even that long ago. Some people are probably still doing this, but like I had like this big zap that had like 14 steps to it, and it would break all the time. I'd have to re-sign into a software, reintegrate something. And I was like, after a couple of years of doing this, I'm like, man, someone's got to make something that like combines all these things. This is like 2018, you know what I mean? And like I went to, the ClickFunnels event, and someone showed me like a white label dashboard. I didn't know what it was. He told me it was his. And like the guy was smart. He's a cool guy. He's nice. But he wasn't like that smart to where like I knew he's trying to pass up as he built it. And I was like, oh, no, I'm like, that doesn't add up. I'm like, this is a lot more, this takes a lot to build. And so I remembered his domain name and I went back to my hotel room that night and I ended up like hacking through his domain, like doing a Google inspect, trying to figure out what this is. And mind you, this is like late 2018, early 2019, somewhere in there. And I'm like, the only thing I could find repeating throughout the site, and this is just my weird, like I call it my touch of the tism, if you will, like my little hacking ability. I'm like, I noticed the pattern of like this messagesender.com popping up all over throughout the Google inspect, the code I could see. And I was like, what is that? And it took me like a couple months to try to figure out what it was, like, because it's hard to figure out what wasn't a white label version of it was actually a HighLevel. And I ended up finding out HighLevel and getting like in the funnel. You guys signed me up early 2019. And so that's kind of like how we got here with HighLevel. And so, but we were already like kind of starting to do this for other peers in my space because I'd grown the gyms. Every business I've owned that has been my like primary revenue stream has been fairly successful by most people's standards. And that's, partially work ethic, partially being in it a long time, partially making a lot of mistakes and knowing what not to do wrong. And in doing that for my gyms, I was always giving, sharing with other gym owners, a lot of my peers. And before too long, naturally, a lot of them were like, hey man, who's doing your marketing stuff? Who's teaching you? Where did you learn all this stuff? I'm like, oh no, I got self-taught, like been doing it for years, right? Been in digital marketing since pretty much as early as you can be, going back with that prior business. And so before too long, guys were like, hey, how much to help me with my website? How much to help me with my ads? Things like that. And we gave it a go for a year, kind of doing like freelance website design. And I found that was not the right way to be doing it. Like these kind of sell a website for one price, one time. And then like they, give you half down, just string you out for 6 months and the rest of it. I was like, this is not the way to do it. And then this kind of model came around, almost like we were in position for it. And like, I was yearning for it as it came about. And then from there it was, okay, cool. Like this is a big part of what we do now, is like being able to provide these systems out of the box for our clients, ready to go, basically like turnkey, right? Which is a big part of what Big Little Gyms, what our company does, is we don't necessarily focus on the tech. We focus on a specific end result for our clients. And the goal is to essentially assemble the pieces for them that just provide this end results, right? Yeah. So hopefully it kind of fills in a little bit of the backstory. I'm sure there's going to be more questions there.
No, absolutely. It's always important to understand the full picture of the entrepreneur before we really evaluate the business they built. So let's talk about SaaSpreneurship for a second. So for those of you that are watching, if you're brand new to the world of HighLevel, one of the cool things we do is we allow you to rebrand, completely white label, completely run a SaaS solution type of a business where you can go to market, claim it as if it's your own, and you keep 100% of the revenue. And that kind of a model is pretty new in the digital landscape. And, it's been kind of revolutionizing in a sense. And Will, you're one of the early, I would say pioneers of doing the work behind the theory. And that's really what I'm excited about. So can we talk about the journey to 500 clients and maybe to organize the thought process here. Let's talk about three things: the operational, the hardship of operational and running the entire business. Let's talk about going to market strategies, like how did you actually crack the code on sales and marketing? And maybe third thing, we can talk about the future, like how are you scaling this? What is that, a software outlook in a business like this look like? So let's talk about operations. What does that look like? What was your first like 10 clients like? Was that a beta? Like what are the things that you did to just get started? And I think operations is the first thing we got to kind of lay the landscape on before we can go into sales and marketing strategies.
Yeah, yeah. So early on, it really is, you're kind of a solopreneur. You're doing all the things. You're selling, you're marketing, you're fulfilling, your what operations and organization there is, you're managing as well. The finances are on you too. You got to make sure the company makes money and stays afloat and pays its bills, and that every dollar you're spending is getting a return, and being good about reinvesting in your business. But the early days, like the first dozen or so, yeah, it pretty much was kind of a beta, and that's and I had a little bit of an audience there to kind of do that with, right? Because you can go out and launch a beta all you want, but if you don't have a little bit of an audience that you've collected from giving some value somewhere, then it's going to be, the offer will fall on deaf ears, right? So luckily, before kind of rolling out the offer that included what HighLevel helped us put together as far as like the tech end goes, as I mentioned before, we were building like one-off websites for our clients. We were basically like, hey, I'll build you like just having built funnels. We call them funnels now, but back in 2008 when I started this, 2007 when I started this, they weren't really funnels. It was just like, a very, an optimized web page that was built for lead generation, right? And it's still pretty much what it all is. It's just how do we remove the friction and increase the conversion rate, right? So that's something I found I've always been good at, is knowing how to do that. So we did that for clients and did some marketing for it and built a little bit of a list there. But on social media, people were kind of following me because I would just always almost give away more for free than like other people would charge for. Like I always had this little bit of a chip on my shoulder from a very young age and it's probably just, being raised with like not as much as most of my friends, right? Naturally, you kind of start to figure out, well, I'm going to just outwork them, right? I'm just going to, or like, if you're going to charge them for that, I'm just going to give it away for free, right? So I would just, and I still do that to this day. I was like, what are the other guys charging for that I can just tell people how to do, right? And that turns out to work for building audience and following. People start to listen to what you have to say. So before too long, I was like, I got this new offer. Let's roll it out for like six people. And that's what I did. And all 6 spaces were taken, right? And at first it was let's just use this to kind of flesh out the operational side of it, right? Like how the thing's going to work and let them know that they are part of a beta and that there is going to be some hiccups and that there is going to be like, we're just figuring out with them, right? And the benefit to them is they get to be early on the thing. They get the benefits before everybody else does, which is cool. So that's kind of how we started it. Now, do you want me to keep talking about our operational strain as it applies to like now and kind of like where we sit now and the things we're running into now?
Yeah, let's go to the end, stage of where operations really are today. And let's work backwards of like, okay, how did you get to your first maybe client success manager or sales rep? Like let's go backwards so that way we're kind of reverse engineering the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So now we have a team of 7 internal employees that are on payroll. And then we have, a couple offshore people as well that we outsource stuff to. I mean, they're pretty much our employees too. They work full time for us. So these aren't like freelance people, but they were when we hired them. Eventually we were just like, hey, you're going to work for us now. But they're offshore. They're technically like on our payroll because they're in other countries. And those are people that we kind of along the way kind of piece together because early on, you hire one guy to help you with a few things. And then you're like, okay, cool, that guy's doing that thing. Okay, I need a specialist for this. And you hire one guy over there for those things, right? And you start to distribute. But now we have this team and we do have a little bit of a hierarchy to the flow chart. And there is me at the top as acting founder and CEO. And then there's a, kind of an operational management role that we've begun to take very, very seriously in the last couple of years. And we realized like the biggest strain I would say is that like if the business keeps growing, the business can outgrow the people if they aren't like keeping up with themselves. So, just here in December, we had to make some decisions with an exiting team member who was in that role. And I'm super grateful for him and the time he spent with our company. But it was just becoming clear to us in some of the conversations that like, okay, either he's wanting to go a different direction or this has outgrown him, one or the other. And either way, it was like we had to be strategic in how we navigated those waters. And along the way, like knowing that these things can happen, I was fortunate to make some connections where some other people were showing interest in that position, and saying like, "Hey, I'd love to come on the team if an availability ever comes along." And sure enough, like as that person was exiting, another guy kind of stepped up, and we were able to get some people in place. But it was really setting some like setting the 4 R's, the roles, responsibilities, things like that, because essentially as you grow, like you can't run the day-to-day of the business while also being like the head of marketing, like the acting CRO of the company as well. Because like bigger businesses, like I'm sure HighLevel has it now, where you guys have a CRO, a CMO, a CFO, a COO. There's like a C-suite executive for every single independent part of this company, and collectively you guys make it run like a machine. But when you're smaller, you don't have the resources to pay that many people just to do one job. But early on, it's like you're CEO, but you're also CRO, you're also CMO, and so you start delegating, right? And then below them, we have a project manager, we have those pieces, and just been assembling them along the way.
I love that. And I think the one part people forget is like you can put everybody in the right seats and assume that they're going to give you the direction to take the school bus, but all
Yeah.
that comes from the interlacing of like your ability to create the right culture. Because if the culture's not there, the leadership skills are not there, you're not going to find the right direction. You may find a direction, but it may not be the fastest and the most efficient. But so let's go back to the first hire. Like, how did you first decide that it's time? Let me go ahead and start expanding and kind of duplicating yourself for some of those activities.
Yeah. So and I learned this from my gyms. That was like, especially in the way of like follow up, right? Almost all businesses, when it comes to like getting clients, that the real linchpin there is follow up, right? Once they start figuring out how to get leads, that's like the first step. Leads doesn't mean customers. Like follow up's the linchpin there, and like having worked with like thousands of small businesses now, and also like advice for several other people trying to do what I'm doing now. It's like you can boil the conversation down far enough, and you're like, oh, like you suck at follow up. You should be way better at follow up. You know what I mean? And like so that was the first place. I was like, I know I can get an ROI there, because I am busy enough now to where like I can see myself sliding on follow up. And it's all about speed to lead. It's all about getting back to leads quicker, because if they're looking at your stuff, odds are they're probably considering 2 other guys' stuff as well. And really, whoever gets back to them first is probably going to win in that conversation, because like after having a conversation about their current situation, desired situation, and bridging that gap, they don't want to do it again. They don't want to explain it to the next guy, and like it gets redundant, right? Like, so being first is a huge advantage, right? And that was always like when I was in car sales, it was like I used to. This is before the iPhone was even out. I used to have a Palm Pilot. I used to stand on the corner of the lot and I'd watch cars come in on the lot. And if I could hear the brakes squeaking a little bit and someone's stopping to come on the lot, like I put the phone down and I ran out on the lot and I got that lead. I was always the first guy to get that customer coming in the lot. Or if a lead came in over the CRM, because I had the Palm Pilot, the other guys were just either had to go inside to use a computer because we didn't have those kinds of machines back then. I was like, no, I could do it right here and be responding to the lead, right? And it was always about speed to lead, right? And then obviously you got to be good at sales and all that stuff too after that. But that's my way of saying, like, it was really easy to hire a right hand, have her do a whole bunch of other things, a bunch of other like, hey, I want you to communicate with this client when their website's ready, and make sure that we get them scheduling a call with me so we can launch their website, right? Like she could do that kind of stuff, but while she was busy in between, she could do follow up and keep speed to lead short. So like it was within like 2-3 months that we saw like a 3x on the money we were paying her to have someone working 30 hours a week working front desk work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in the beginning also, the game is everyone's wearing all hats. There's no titles, there's no ivory tower somebody's climbing into. I mean, everybody's doing everything. And then you'll figure out like essentially how some people have their own lanes and strengths and weaknesses. Help us understand that. Like so the first person comes in, they're basically just running the show with you, right? Then
Yeah.
was that a fulfillment person or a salesperson? Like what level of book of business were you at before you made that decision? Like were you past beta or were you at the 100, client level? Like where were we at?
Yeah. So we were probably about 30-40 clients when I brought her in. And she was doing this kind of work for me at my gym prior. And it's not different really, whether it be an agency or a SaaS company or a tech company or a gym, really, like, that hire, that's kind of your first hire, your right hand is kind of a generalist, right? There's generalists and there's specialists. And at first, when you're small and you can only afford 1 or 2 people, like you hire a generalist, someone that, is what they call it, like a T-shaped person. Maybe they're really good at one thing, but they can all do a lot of things kind of well and are adaptable. And you pay that person well and you keep paying them well, and then eventually you hire a second person to kind of complement, right? And then as you grow bigger and bigger, you start to hire specialists, right? You hire people that are just good at like web design, people that are just good at like tech support, right? Because the generalists will eventually get burned out if you have them going too deep on things that aren't necessarily they're like genius, right? So at first, yeah, definitely like broader generalized person. And someone really bought into your mission, right? That's why I was fortunate enough to find early with someone that like I was bought on my mission. And I'll say, because you said this earlier, that like it all comes down to how good you are at sharing that mission. Like you're gonna define that for yourself and then learn how to like paint that picture for other people. Because the better you get at painting that picture for other people, the more people are going to want to jump on that boat with you and row towards the island, right? And burn the boats once they get to that island, right? And that's something definitely when I was younger and I started my first companies back in 2007, 2008, made a lot of hires. And I love to look back and be like, oh, it's all their fault. They're just bad hires. But I'm like, no, being older and more mature now, looking back at the younger entrepreneurial version of me, it was like, I was blaming everything on everybody else, but like I definitely did not have these skills that I have now that I've acquired around like leadership and vision and like people would say that stuff to me, like this pie in the sky vision stuff. I'd go to like you listen to like Silicon Valley tech guys talk about you got to have a great vision. And I'd be like, whatever, they're just blowing smoke, like trying to hype people up. And then like man, why do good people keep leaving me? Why do I keep having headbutting sessions with people? And then like here we are now, and it's almost like it's like harmony. It's like we're all in this together going towards the same island and we're excited about it, you know?
I love that. So help me understand the fulfillment side of operations. So you got your generalist in board. I mean, you're at 30, 40 clients in. What did your tech stack look like? What did your offer look like? And then maybe let's segue into sales and marketing strategies. But help us understand, what did you offer? What was your price points? How did you decide on that whole avatar?
Yeah. So we started with a setup. We have as far as price points go, we start with a setup fee in the couple $1,000 range, and then it would go into like a recurring that's in the hundreds of dollars range. And earlier on, naturally, like it's higher now than it was then, but relative to the time, we never sold it cheap. Like that was never the goal to be a low price leader. We go more for like a high value, like something that feels like it should be thousands of dollars a month, but they're paying hundreds of dollars a month, right? And we started with an onboarding that's like 8 weeks long. And in that, we wanted to just give them some time to see like an ROI on the initial setup fee. And that was kind of like almost like our early guarantee of like, hey, if by the end of 8 weeks, if you haven't seen like, if you spent 2000 with us, if you haven't seen 2001, you let me know and we'll work it out. Like, you know what I mean? I don't want you in a situation where like you're doing business with me that's costing you more, because the goal is you should be getting an ROI on this thing, right? So like, that's always how we've been about it, and still pretty much are. We don't really lead with the guarantee stuff too much because we don't want to be selling a guarantee. We also just know our stuff works, and we don't want people buying a guarantee because that causes its own issues as you get bigger. But when you're small and it's early and you're like really working to prove yourself, I think it can be worth it to kind of stand behind your product. If anything, it's just a vote of confidence. Most people aren't even going to take you up on that, but just showing that you're willing to get behind it. But we did that, and then they roll into a month to month thereafter. That's how most people still pay for these to this day. Is like it's a month to month. You could do it annually if you wanted to. What we do is we run like once or twice per year. We'll run an annual deal where if they pay for it annually, they can save a couple of months. And usually one of those will be around like Black Friday, for example, and we'll do multiple six figures like just over that weekend now. And every year that snowballs bigger and bigger because you get all the renewals from the year before, and then we get another X number of people that want to jump aboard. It's like whatever, it's like the same percentage of our client base every year that takes that Black Friday deal, but but the client base is bigger, right? We've doubled
Yeah.
year over year since 2019. We started ended 2019, I think, with what, like 75 clients. 2020 was 150. Last year was you have to reverse engineer whatever it is, but it's basically been doubling ever since 2019.
Yeah.
Ever since. And so like that number of people that takes the full paid in fulls doubles every year too.
Yeah. So real quick, can you help us understand the business model? So is it a retainer that you're starting off and then you're parking them into a subscription? Like, oh, are you still doing website design, or like was it a SaaS hybrid, as Rob Ailey and Mike Cooch guys, those guys call it the SWAS? What was the actual
Sure.
business model? How much was it?
Oh yeah.
How much
Okay.
of it is actually SaaS?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. So we look at it kind of like almost like a three-pronged approach, right? Like in our space and in most spaces, it's the same in almost all niches, is there's tech companies like providing tech solutions to the people in the niche. In the case of gyms, which is who we work with, there's like these gym management software companies that'll like also sell them a website and sell them some other like widgetry, right? And then there's like mentors, right? You have mentorship on the other side of things. You got like these people that just want to give advice, and it's just IP essentially. There's no like practical, A, B, C, D or done for you components or anything like that. And we kind of looked at it like, well, we're really better at both of those things. So what's going to make us unique is the kind of like the stacking of both, like a hybrid is a good way of putting it. I don't know if I would call it the same SaaS type of offering as, those guys bundle it up as. I got to figure out a name for it. I got to brand mine. Oh, maybe I'll call it, I don't know, some other sassy word that has a catchphrase to it. But yeah, we want to look at it like we want to provide the value that, they pay these mentorship companies, which is in the tens of thousands of dollars per year, and having like SOPs outlined, how to run a better business, how to use the tools we're giving you, right? Like, it doesn't make sense for me to just give someone a CRM if they don't even know how to like run ads, right? Like the upside is going to be limited if they can't drive traffic into it, right? And that's something that they either have to pay a bunch of money to an agency to have to go and do, or I can give them the playbooks on, right? And that's just an example, right? It's not just about ads. We have a community platform that has a classroom in there, and that essentially has like everything in there that like one would need. Like, if you were going to start a gym tomorrow, you could literally go through this and launch and build $1 million gym. Because it's got every single playbook in there you would need, right? So that stuff that's the stuff people view as like worth a lot of money, right? 5 figures, 6 figures to get access to. And, and then you go to the tech side and it's like, well, I'm not really that impressed with what a lot of these tech companies are providing the gym owners, right? Like websites that look circa 2012, right? Like a brochure, right? Not built for lead generation, not built for what we call like conversion rate optimization, right? So I'm like, well, I know how to do that really, really well because I've done that a lot. Like, and I also understand SEO really, really well. I understand how these other platforms work and how to put it all together for people. So I was like, okay, we're going to include that too. So when people get in front of us, they're like, okay, they're expecting to spend, really, really popular one, for example, Alex Hormozi's gym launch, right? They were really a big hit, like in our niche, like 5 years ago. They're still around, but pretty sure we're bigger now. But either way, like they, more or less, like they were like a $15,000, $16,000, $20,000 program just to get started for like the first 12 weeks, right? And then we hit them with our offer, at if they paid for the whole year, they wouldn't pay anywhere near half that. And they're like, holy cow, this is better. And I get all the tech. And I'm not getting nickel and dime with all these other features, right? So it's just stacking so much value that the person's like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, right? How can I say no here? And they can't, because it doesn't make sense to.
It sounds like you're leading a education-based front end offer, and you're overstacking the value to the point it's disruptive. That's literally what happened. And you're parking them into a subscription to stabilize them. That's what I'm understanding so far. Is that pretty good assumption?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all about recurring revenue. Yeah, we want the recurring revenue.
Yeah. So then let's talk about the second pillar of our conversation, which is sales and marketing. Like, how did you go to market? How did you stabilize the market? How did you capture the market? Give us a full rundown of that launch versus the scale,
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of it, I mean, our business still to this date is mostly organic, right? Like mostly organic. Those early days of just giving away more than the other company charges for, really built the snowball with a lot of surface area. Like, it's gotten big, and it's like, just has increased our luck surface area, if whatever you want to call it, right? The ability for us to just generate business from all these different ways, and by just like being very prolific about that and giving that stuff away. But we do run some ads, and we run a very like retargeting focused strategy of like first getting people to find us through like more natural channels, right? We have a lot of word of mouth in our space. Like, we work specifically so my gyms are CrossFit affiliates, right? And there's just some circles that if you're a CrossFit affiliate back in the day, you could get into that like the average marketer or other guy couldn't get into, because like they just wouldn't let you in those groups, right? And in order to even offer advice in those groups, you have to also kind of prove that you know what you're doing, right? So, and that was never my intention, was to try to do that. I actually just kind of would just get in there, and I just noticed that a lot of gym owners were struggling with things that I was really good at. So I was like, hey, I noticed a lot of you guys are struggling. I want to see everybody do well. So like, here's what I do. And that's what I did, right? Just give a lot of value, right? Versus like jump in and just pitch, right? And so that's what we did early on. And then it was starting to spread our wings into some of the other channels like Instagram, YouTube, things like that, making more of efforts on those things. And then before too long, as people would find me through those channels, through word of mouth, through some of that value, it was retargeting them pretty heavily, right? So like I would do a lot of testimonial, a lot of use cases, a lot of what you guys are doing right now here with me. And then I would share that stuff and make sure that like they got hit with that stuff in our follow-up. And not in our follow-up as in like our outreach follow-up, but in like retargeting strategies. And like, instead of running ads that are like, get 30 members and, everybody we compete with, everybody that tries to help gyms with, probably most guys that work with gyms watch this video right now, their offer is probably something like get 50 members in 30 days, right? And it's like, if you owned a gym or even like talk to gym owners for a minute, you would know that like, they don't want that. They don't want 30 members in 30 days. Like that's not realistic. And sure, maybe if it is realistic, like, can they retain the number of clients when it's like them and two coaches? Like they can't, right? Most of these independent small gyms like just want to grow at a nice steady rate, like 5 to 10 members per month, right? So it was like really getting in touch with the reality there. And like also like the gym owners after a while started to trust me and see like, okay, cool. Like this guy's not blowing smoke. He understands what we can handle. It sounds like he's trying to do it in a sustainable, predictable way. So it was like really just talking a lot about that kind of stuff and then making sure like a lot of our retargeting stuff thereafter, like just reiterated a lot of that stuff. Hopefully that
I
helps
No, that
answer.
makes total sense. Help us understand
Yeah.
your sales division at this point. You're like, you know what? Offer's kind of confirmed. I'm kind of disrupting the space with education. How
Mhm.
do I now scale this from a full-on sales effort? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So naturally we just kept focusing on that more and more. And like as I noticed that stuff was working, like I just started handing off more of the things that were pulling me away from that. So it's like, okay, cool. I need to clearly publishing regularly is working. And it's very clear that like when I let off the gas with publishing, our lead flow slows down. Like it was just like after enough ups and downs of like, why did the lead flow stop? It was like, oh, it's like, well, you didn't publish for 2 weeks there because you were busy tied up working on websites, right? So let's get a project manager involved to manage some of this stuff and talk to the client, deliver the website, right? So it was doing a lot of that stuff. Sorry, rephrase your question there again, Paul, so I can make sure I don't leave an open
No,
loop there.
I was asking, how did you get to the world of putting some sales,
Oh yeah.
energy behind the offer? Like you confirmed the offer, brought in your team, you understand the value of the offer. You're like, you know what? I'm blasting these guys with education, and I'm here to stay. Now, how did you get your first sales guy in there or gal in there? And what was it? What did that look like?
Yeah. So even up to what 300 plus clients, I still was doing all sales, right? I was still doing sales. Cause I mean, to get to 300 clients over the course of 3 years, like you don't need like 60 every month. You just need like
Yeah.
a dozen a month. If
And
you're doing
and
a
is
dozen a
that
month,
Yeah, and is that because you generally like sales yourself? You came from that world. You're like, you know what? I am already an expert in that space. Let me stay with my strengths and hire for my weaknesses. Like, what was your philosophy there?
so the philosophy is two parts. So there's partially that, right? I am good at it. They know me. They're seeing me all over the place. There's that authority there. And so when you jump on that call, because you are the authority, not like a salesman and some other guy, they're like, oh yeah, like the close rate's like 90%, right? Great marketing makes sales easy in a way. And especially if it's you that's getting on the call with them, right? So there is that. But then there's also like just the math of it, right? Like even if you're not great at sales, like almost every other job in a business is cheaper to hire out than like one more sale will net you, right? So it's like, and there's also like a plentiful number of people that can help you with the tech side of things. Whereas like finding good sales reps is much harder, like much harder. Especially ones that like that know what you're selling and have like some familiarity with it, especially if you're pretty niche, like what we're doing. So it was like it also just made sense for me to stay in the highest dollar per hour position as long as possible. Like, why would I continue to build websites? That's like $20 to $30 an hour work. Like you can find really good web designers in other countries that like one of our guys now that like has been with us since one of the first offshore hires we made, works full time for us. He makes $7,000 to $8,000 a month helping us get our websites up to the quality control. We QA all of our websites before they go live, and that's done in-house. And but he gets them up to that point, so the redundant stuff is just handled, right? And it's like that changes his life in his country. Like that money is life changing. Like he gets on the calls and our team calls and he's got a nice leather jacket on. I'm like, look at you with your leather jacket, man. He's like, he's so proud, like, and it's like So I can pay him to do 40 or 50 of those a month. And I can go and close 10 more deals, which is going to, the input to output ratio there is like 10 to 1, and what I can go and create value for my company versus like me being the guy to go like click the mouse and do the website stuff. And there's another guy who wants to do that stuff, who loves to do that stuff, that's going to be better than me at it if I get him some reps, and if he's bought in, he's gonna do it with a smile on his face, right?
I I love that. So then you get all the way to like 300 plus, and it's a pretty lean team from what you're describing. And this
Yep.
is, by the way, if you're watching this on this podcast, this is a very similar story I hear from other SaaSpreneurs. Most of them are able to run a very lean team because they're productizing their service behind them. They don't have to build 100 or 50-man agency type of team behind them where one guy's doing graphic design, the other one's doing web design, the other one's doing Facebook ads, and they're putting it all together, throwing it off to account managers. Like that world is kind of not there anymore with SaaS. So how did you maintain the quality of fulfillment as you scaled with sales? Like, of course, you paid your guys well, but like, what does the relationship look like with between your customers and you as you're scaling with sales?
Yeah. So I mean, early on, it took a lot of time blocking, right? Somewhere in the middle there, there's definitely times where like I was selling, 4 sales calls a day and 4 onboardings to do. Right. So like you start finding ways to get more efficient. Early on, I was like, I want to, I can't imagine doing group onboardings. I think the quality is going to go down. Right. But we're like, hey, we got to give it a try, because if we can do 1 call with 3 people in an hour versus 3 calls over 3 hours, that's a huge win. Right. And after the first couple of times we did it, we're like, okay, we got to like change some things to make this work in group. Right. And then eventually it was hiring some other agents to help us on the team. It definitely helped. Like, we hired from within. We had some clients that like run great businesses that just were, love the mission, love going through it. We're like, how can we help? Right. So it's nice to have them step up and like almost work in part-time roles for a little while and fill some gaps and things like that. But I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a point where it is just hard, right? When you got a couple hundred clients and you're still doing a little bit of sales, and you're also managing the community, the tribe, and all those things, and you're doing a little bit of fulfillment, like there's definitely like a moment there where it's hard, but like you don't want to let it be hard too long. You hire where it hurts, right? So eventually you do bring some people on. That first hire I mentioned earlier that came on, she eventually would do some of the onboardings for us. And it was just taking the risk of getting that person some reps, right? And it was like a lot of shadowing. We'd have them shadow probably like 50 or 60 like onboarding like calls. And it wasn't like that would take a long time if it was only new ones. So I would record my onboarding calls. I would record all of them, and I'd have them in a library, and I'd be like, hey, I want you to go watch like 20 of these and look at like every different way that this can go down. And like before too long, like you're having meetings and you're talking and discussing like, hey, what'd you learn? And then, it's also like investing in them. It's going back to that leadership thing of like, are they mission and vision aligned with you? Are they a believer in the product? If they are, they're going to like want to get those reps in and like want to be good at it, because like they want to have a stake in this. So
Absolutely. So let's talk about the third pillar, which is like, okay, what does the future look like after 500 plus, clients? Like, what is, where are you starting? Like, what does the vision look like? Maybe give me like a quarterly business review of how you're looking at it. And, and I think a lot of SaaSpreneurs and even agency owners and marketers that are watching this, they're going to get a lot out of it from the structure of how you're planning your next quarter. Like, help us understand what that looks like. How are you maintaining that initial energy and culture with the team while scaling, essentially?
yeah. So we do weekly team meetings. We'll probably start doing those bi-weekly, only because like some of our recent hires, we've realized like they don't need as much handholding. Like in the last call we did, for example, was like it was a great call, but it was just a lot of cheerleading. And I was like, I could tell that they were like, okay, like we crushed it. Can we all go back to work now? Like they were like excited to get off the call and go. Like it wasn't like a bad thing, but I could feel the vibe, and like there wasn't like as much cross-departmental communication needed in those calls. So like I think weekly team meetings, and then kind of listening to your team from there, and sharing them with the vision, very like open. Like we're open on like everything. Like it's almost like even all the way down to like our books and our profitability. And if you have the right people on your team, like that's not going to be awkward to them. You'll know you have the wrong people on your team when you can't have conversations about money the business is making, or if you feel in some way, this could be like on yourself too, is like you're growing as an agency owner and like you're starting to make money that like in your mind when maybe you were younger coming up, you never thought you'd see. If you have a weird relationship with that money, sometimes that insecurity can come off on your team of like, you're projecting onto them in a way that makes them feel makes it too much about the money, or like you feel like you're not sharing enough or whatever. But like the right people who like are aligned with you, and if they're professionals, well, if you are like grade A people, this is just a scoreboard. Like, and this is just money is just the scoreboard, right? No one's feeling like they're not getting their fair share or anything like that. And obviously, you do pay people well, and you do that proactively. You don't always wait for people to ask for more money to give it to them. Sometimes you're noticing and reinforcing good behavior as you go, and working to, to stay ahead of the curve on those things. But yeah, open communication for us, like, you know, uh, we'll hit 1,000 clients, and that's not even like a flex, or like that's not one of those things of saying like, oh, I really want to hit 1,000 clients. Like, no, BLG will hit 1,000 clients. Like the writing's already on the wall. Like we're already heading there. Like we signed, 40 new clients just this last month alone, and since we've been watching this company since it's grown, and we made all these moves to put the pillars underneath it, and then me stay out on the forefront of it, being the face of the company, and continue to do what I've always done really, really well, and build the brand. Like it's almost like we'll hit a new level, it'll be a new spike, and then within 6 months, that's our new normal. Like, and so we've seen that again and again, and there's no part of it right now that feels like we're really, really pressing. It's almost kind of like it's happening for us, right? But I would also say like a lot of that's like all those years of doing it wrong, and like, I've had much smaller businesses that hit friction points and plateaus much, much earlier that felt like I was laboring way more than this company. And I think it's also just like some entrepreneurial development in myself too. So
Yeah, it seems like what you're doing and the way you've built is it's like natural growth
mhm.
versus pressurized growth. Pressurized growth is where one day you got 100 grand and you're rolling it all into Facebook ads on one Saturday. By Monday, you're onboarding a ton of clients and throwing so much pressure into the back end of the business where it just all flops, right? So like it sounds like you've done the natural, steady, organic, just paced, well poised to mature type of growth that, a lot of the early entrepreneurs they don't do. So my gut tells me you had the vision from your previous business of building up $5-6 million, essentially like a franchise model. So then when you come into the SaaS world, you're like, okay, I know what not to do. Let me just figure out what's the right thing to do today. Help us understand how you look at it.
yeah, man, some of it's like, there's so much deep work that go. I firmly believe, like having been through what I've been through, because I've been come from nothing, had success in my early 20s, growing that first company I told you guys about, kind of had like a fall from grace with that. Like the gyms were really owning the gyms were like kind of almost like this low point in my life. Not the gyms themselves created the low point. It's just that like I wanted to do something very humble and very like, I wanted to work with my hands. I wanted to be like involved with people. I wanted to build a community. I wanted to build a tribe. And like I've always been into athletics and fitness, and the group fitness thing was really booming in the 2010s, and I just thought it was like a really, really cool way to do this. Like rather than like, doing bicep curls alone in a mirror, it's like, no, we're gonna work out with like a group of people, and it's gonna be super fun, and we're gonna work towards a common goal. We're all gonna support each other. And so there was like this time where I did all that. And it also like created some like mental hardships for me as well. I went through like some pretty major like mental health issues in like maybe 2016, 2017. Um, and it was almost like a finding myself moment. And it was almost like I look at like a snake shedding their skin. And it was like, I think I had the mindset so many agency owners I see have when they come to me and they're just focused on like just the money of it, right? Like they come into this, and I think it's normal for a young guy or gal to just be focused on like their career and their money, but not really focus so much on like mission impact and like how they can actually. And that's the trouble with saying that word, is that's even such a cliche word now to say like mission and impact and all this stuff. But then people just use it to kind of like, hype people up. But it's like, no, like how can you genuinely get more value for the person that you're serving than like you're taking from them, right? Like how is it a multiplier benefit to them? And if you do that, what happens is you earn a customer that like just never churns, because they're always like, yeah, every dollar I give Will gives me five, right? And in order to come to that place, it's almost like I had to have a complete breakdown and like rebuild of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, why am I here on this planet, like doing these things? Because if it's just about the money and just like how I get my next customer and how I get that money from them and put it in my own pocket, then like you end up like living a pretty shallow life and like not, and you
Yeah.
end up not building very good businesses either, you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, you're a family man. I mean, you take all this home, right? Like you don't mean to, but like all of it will come home. The energy, the stress, the struggle, it will come home. How, we'll kind of close with this. How have you figured out the balance for home? The meaningful things that you do for your kids, your family. Like, I mean, this is all cool and dandy. Me and you could talk about strategy, but like this is my favorite part of every conversation. How are you building like meaning and purpose behind the entrepreneur of who you are today?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like having kids was like, I thought it was going to be like, oh, the entrepreneur Will is really going to struggle now because now I've got to like put that in a box and like bookend it every day and like turn that off and go be this guy. I don't have to, but I want to, right? Like I want to be more so than I want to be good at this. I'm going to make myself cry, but like, I want to be better at this part of my life than this part of my life. And I thought like that be better at this part of my life would mean making a concession to this part of my life. But this part of my life actually made this part of my life better because I was like, okay, cool. Like I've got 8 hours a day, like to get some work done and like and put my head down and focus. And what's funny is because I'm like cutting the fat and I'm not messing around consuming BS on the internet that's not necessary or like creating more shiny objects for myself. Like I think that is another thing that plagues a lot of younger up and coming marketers and agency owners and SaaS and founders and things like that is like they just because they got this, they're making a little bit of money and now they've got some free time to like play in the sand. They go and create more problems for themselves. Like, no, no, no. Like I don't have that free time anymore that I had prior to having my kids, where I would stay up to like midnight. I get a lot of really good work done at midnight, man. Like I'm sure Paul said, you're nodding your head, like right, like midnight. It's like for some reason the light bulb turns on, and you're like, oh, I got all these great ideas, and we're getting it done. But that I decided that I'm putting that away now in this phase of life, and it's funny is like I'm getting more done in less time, and it's working for me. And I built a better business with like less stress. Um, and it's like the word balance is
It's
I have a weird relationship with that word, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
like it's not about like trying to find balance. It's like I'm more like swinging from one side to the other, like as hard as I can. It's like the work hard, play hard mentality. I think works for me. Is like I'll get as gritty and dirty as I have to, and then when we're done, I'm gonna go over here and go as hard as I can with my kids, and we're gonna travel and live a good life, and we're gonna I'm gonna provide things for them that I didn't have for myself growing up, right? So yeah, it's the word balance. And I think I always know what people mean when they say that because I'll say like I'll call that word out. Why didn't mean balance? I'm like,
yeah.
it's a
I
weird
think the better way to look at it is like how have you created the right boundaries?
boundary. Yeah,
Right? The
yeah,
boundaries it's really difficult as entrepreneurs to build, and it takes time, takes a lot of lessons. Like you gotta, like your wife's gotta get to a world where they can't handle you anymore. Like it's just like, honey, you're coming home with everything business related, and how do we create peace at home? Like I find it so fascinating when guys like you, folks that are just scaling. And when they scale, especially with SaaS businesses, because it's not a lot of overhead and fulfillment like the standard agencies, right? I've seen people create that boundary the right way, the healthy way. So, last final thoughts.
yeah. So one thing that we didn't really touch on that I think is a really, really good point is like churn and retention is super, super important in these businesses. In any subscription-based business model. And I was fortunate enough to learn this with gyms that it's like it's way easier to keep and upsell an existing client than it is to have to go and sell just to replace them, right? It's very easy to find yourself in net zero churn if you're losing clients every 4 months, right? You sign 10 new clients a month and you're churning every 4 months. That means you can't really grow beyond like 40 clients, right? You're going to get stuck there. So like one of the keys to my success and our success here at Big Little Gyms has been like what some would consider like industry shattering churn rates. We churn at less than 2%. So like that means we only have to grow at a rate of 5%. And that means we're going to more than double every year and every month, right? Or every year, not every month, but every year. And so like focus on making it really, really sticky. And I think the value of the offer, like we talked about earlier, and constructing that. So like, that your customer can't lose no matter what. And then being a good tribe leader in itself, community is something I'd love to. We can go on for a whole other hour. That I think there's a whole bunch there in regards to like building community, building tribe. And I think people think they know what that means, but I think there's a whole other level of the game there that I've seen very few like SaaS founders do well. That when you figure that out, having value just in your community in and of yourself and of itself is incredibly important, because now your clients are coming here for the other people in the program, not just to get advice and resources from you. They like see value just in like this group that they get to be a part of. And I think I learned that with gyms early on and like building, okay, like all these gyms sell fitness. How am I going to be different? Like, well, okay, we don't sell fitness anymore. We sell community, because community is a way more valuable problem to be solved. The fitness problem can be solved for like $30 a month by like a Lifetime Fitness, and LA Fitness, or a Planet Fitness. Like, I'm not going to compete with that, right? But what they don't provide is community, which is a problem that everybody wants to solve. Most people are really, really lonely, right? And so if we can solve those problems of them being able to get a few more high fives and a little bit more recognition, like they're going to want to pay $200 a month for my gym membership, and they're going to want to pay it for a long, long time. And they can't see themselves going back to the old way of doing it, no matter what it costs. And it's the same thing here in this business as well. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Will, I just want to congratulate you, man, because one thing I've personally noticed about you, I mean, you came to our mastermind, you've been to like literally all of our events, and as you scaled, and no matter how big you got, there's like this, I don't know, like there's like this level of humility about you that is so constant and it's noticeable. And that's a very similar culture of what we build inside High Level.
Yeah.
So, congrats to you. You're gonna make me cry here for no reason, but congrats to what you're building. It's very respectable, and I'm excited. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you're gonna do some really industry changing things in the space. I'm genuinely excited.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, we all do align really well. Whenever I go to the events and get to talk to you or Chase, or I had dinner with Chase and Wes at the last mastermind, and it was like, this wasn't a business relationship. We were just hanging out. And it's like, I think there's some very similar qualities and some alignment there. And I agree. I think that's what makes the ship sail. I think there's a lot of people um, that are seeing that, and which is why HighLevel is growing so fast. And so I also, give you guys a shout out, because I've been here since the beginning. And like I from day one, I was like, oh, this is going to be big. And the way they're going about it is the right way. So I'm like super excited to be a part of it. And why I show up and why I come to everything is just, to help wherever I can. Right. It's always worked out for me to be of value and be of service. And as a man, I'm like, as men, we just want to be, and women too. It's not just a man thing, but like, I look at my son and I'm like, he just wants to be helpful. Like he just wants to feel useful. And I'm like, that's what I want too. We all want that, right?
Yeah.
We all want some meaning to the work that we do. So yeah, you just keep showing up and just keep giving, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
man, I appreciate you for such a powerful conversation. Thanks for your time. I'm looking forward to serving more, and maybe even doing another session a couple of months down the line to just kind of get a progress note. I'm sure I'll see you at the conference as well.
Yeah.
But either way, thanks for watching, you guys. In case if you are not part of the High Level family, somewhere in the links or description below, there's probably a 30-day trial or a 14-day trial. Take advantage of it. We're a bunch of normal people that love building a bunch of cool things. And Will, thanks for stopping by again for our High Level podcast.
My pleasure, man. Happy to be a part of it.